So Tom and Lala are married now. Huh. Oh well, I wish them a long and happy marriage. Well. Warrior's Gate. The finale to the E-Space Trilogy. Will it end things on a high note, or will it be yet another misstep for Season 18? Well, there's only one way to find out. And that's to watch this video. Or you could just watch it yourself, I suppose, in which case there's two ways. Whatever, let's just get on with it. We're in the 80s. Keeping up that streak of four-parters, this time bringing us into the year 1981, Warrior's Gate sees the Doctor, Romana, K9 and Adric fall into some kind of null void between E-Space and In-Space. In-Space being their universe where they're originally from, and Exo-Space being this seemingly pointless plot point that they've been stuck in for the last few serials and doesn't seem to be relevant outside of this trilogy. If it turns out this is all a ploy by, say, the Master or something, I'll be surprised. Anyways, it starts off strong, with the entire opening filmed like one of those classic sci-fi horror space operas, very grand and atmospheric, with some of those sweeping visuals of a spacecraft in disarray. But in case you were concerned that things would stray too far from the norm, not to worry, because the TARDIS console explodes and K9 dies again all within the first 5 minutes. I'm starting to wonder if K9 getting destroyed and rebuilt in the same episode he was reintroduced in the modern series in, School Reunion, was a direct homage to the amount of times he got blown up, disemboweled, dispatched, decapitated, sizzled, fried, baked and left to simmer for 20 minutes on low heat in the classic series. To summarise the general gist of the plot, the TARDIS team are stuck. Then a group of humans in a spaceship full of furries are also stuck. And the furries are very mysterious and aloof. You're never quite sure who's the good guys and bad guys. Well, until the end, but even then. But I'll say right now, none of them seem to be particularly evil or moral. They've both very clearly been victims and dickheads at one point or another. The story is very determined to be as vague as possible, harkening back to some of those old serials where you're just watching things happen for an hour and a half before the final 10 minutes where you finally figure out what's been going on the whole time, and spoiler alert, this ain't much better. Let's start with what I liked. Tom Baker and Lala Ward give exceptional performances here. It's clear that Tom still has a little bit of spark of passion for the role of the Doctor in him, especially when he gets to deliver bombastic monologues. Romana, on the other hand, is a bit weird in this one. She acts like a completely different person around some of the side characters, like, yes, no, maybe. I think it's supposed to be an act to throw them off, but it just comes across like a kid trying to be all mysterious and know-it-all-y. Certainly an eccentric performance. Speaking of kid, I actually found Adric to be not that annoying this time around. Dare I say, I almost found him endearing. One of my regular commenters, Nymphadel Sullivan, pointed out they never quite understood the intense hatred towards Adric because he's just a kid, which I mostly agree with. As I've said before, I haven't seen much of Adric before coming into this review series, but even then I've heard about the disdain for his character. To be fair, that was mostly fan vitriol back in the 80s that I've heard of, so I've got no idea how people feel about him today. But what I will say is, yeah, he can be quite annoying. There's a good chance he was deliberately written to be that way. I mean, annoying children were a very popular character archetype back in the day for some reason, especially in animated films. Problem is, despite only being 19 at the time, which isn't that old, the actor for Adric does not look like a child, but he acts like a child. Wow, that was a long ramble. Going back to what I was saying before about great performances from the main cast, John Leeson shines as K9, as always. This time around, due to events of the plot, he gets to deliver a range of emotions and characteristics outside of his normal wheelhouse, And I mean, hey, you always know I love K9, even if the characters in the story don't. That had me howling with laughter. Genuinely. I had to rewind it a couple of times to rewatch it to make sure I did see what I just saw. This serial, as incoherent and darker than usual subject matter as it can be, this does sprinkle in a good dosage of gags to add some levity. These two comedic relief characters are an absolute standout. Sure, they don't really fit with the tone of the story, but I didn't care much for the story anyway, so they were a welcome addition. And then there's stuff like this that's just unintentionally goofy. What the heck am I watching? Let's put a mental bookmark in this right now, because I'm going to come back around to it, mostly because I want to get my positives over and done with so we can rip into this. The face makeup for the furries, the ferals, is great. Sure, they might be stupid, but at least they got that aspect done and look convincing enough. And I like the robot samurai. They look cool. And that does it for the positives. You know what I love? You know what I really, really love? When the entire second half of your recording decides, who needs sound? Audio isn't important. Here's just a bunch of scratchy static noises, so I have to come back the next day and completely re-record the entire second half of my review while looking like the Brigadier from Temu. Yesterday was Halloween when I filmed the first half of this video. Now it's the 1st of November. Movember. That's the joke. I'm not going to keep it. But now I have it, and now I'm re-recording the second half of this review with it on my face. Well, that's got me in the right mood to talk about the negatives of the story again. Right, now I can be brutally honest. Like I said before, this harkens back to many a classic serial that just meanders along, leaving you in the dark as to what's going on and where is this even headed. And not in like there's clearly a mystery going on that you can piece together while you go along kind of way. No, it's just stuff happens and you don't know why until the very end, if you're lucky enough to even have a character explain it. Poorly. It's all a bit confusing, with characters zipping back and forth between dimensions, I think, with no rhyme or reason. You really gotta be paying close attention, because there's loads of technical jargon. And I believe I'm not the only one to pick up on this. One of the benefits of having to re-record this section is I can just ramble off a little ad-lib about what I saw when looking it up on Wikipedia, because I was so confused as to how this came to be the way it is. And apparently the person that wrote the script submitted it, and like every person that looked on it was unhappy with it and was equally as confused. So they had a script doctor come in and try and touch it up, but it just got to the point where they just had to make it the way it was. And the whole sweeping camera shot at the start, apparently that was intentional. Like, where I said it was like a space opera sort of thing, like that was an intentional decision, which is all well and good, but the end product kind of, well, it speaks for itself if you've seen it. That's all well and good, but my goodness, that final episode straight up devolves into amateur hour. It bypasses camp territory and dives headfirst into straight cringe. Get ready for a whole lot more of that weird holding hands while staring into the middle distance as you fade into the ether nonsense. With awkward camera shots, wonky effects, and straight up bad acting, this really does stray into hot garbage territory. And I'm not talking about the awesome Voodoo Blue song. Its saving grace is that it's not all entirely terrible, but it does have a lot of crap in it. Oh, and it ends strongly. So feel free to take the pin out where we put it in earlier, because I have covered the sheer cringe and terribleness that it devolves into. But before we get on to the ending, just a few things that aren't necessarily good or bad, just stuff that I noticed. Y'all know the drill by now. Unless this is your first classic Doctor Who review by the Dirvinator, in which case, hi, this normally isn't here. We get some inadvertently familiar looking locations. The white void in between E and N space looks an awful lot like the Celestial Toymaker's domain. The original black and white version, not the modern CGI version, which I still haven't watched yet, but I assume has a lot more colour to it. And this gothic, dilapidated castle looks eerily similar to the one from The Brain of Morbius. Probably just a coincidence. This is a very minuscule thing that I couldn't help but notice, but is specific to Warrior's Gate. You know how in classic Doctor Who, the beginning of an episode will often replay a smidgen of the cliffhanger from the previous episode? Well, for whatever reason, in this serial, the episode intros seem to repeat a much longer chunk of the prior ending. Again, not particularly good or bad, just makes me wonder if they didn't have enough footage to fill out the runtime, so they had to repeat a bit more than usual. But again, benefit of hindsight, now that I'm having to re-record this a day later, when I was reading up on Wikipedia before, it mentioned that, like, yeah, it was intentionally written and got to be filmed like a movie sort of thing, like a big old long serial. So that might be why the cliffhangers and stuff feel a bit weird, in which case they should have just released an omnibus version, I guess. Moving on, something else worthy of note. This story might be a little bit too scary for some younger viewers. There is a potentially horrifying scene with a body being reanimated while screaming in pain, with electrocution sound effects playing and smoke billowing out from under the sheet. And the episode ends with Romana restrained to a chair, unable to move, screaming in terror directly into the camera as a first-person perspective shows a hand reach for her face. So yeah, like I said, those moments of levity are much needed. My favourite of which being, boop, right, seal the doors. Seal the doors once I've gone through them. Man, Romana's scream in fear during the cliffhanger is genuinely haunting. Leave it to Lalla Ward to bring her A-game, convincingly acting truly terrified in her first and final appearances. Yep, I still remember that first cliffhanger in Destiny of the Daleks. You could see the fear on her face. And yeah, you might have noticed I just said final appearance, because if it wasn't obvious, this is her swan song. The circumstances behind it were pretty sudden and stupid. I mean Romana's exit, not Lalla Ward's. But at least they did set it up, sort of, earlier in the season, with her not wanting to return to Gallifrey and her old boring life. Like every other companion departure in the Fourth Doctor's era, it's super rushed, but at least the Doctor says that he's gonna miss her. Dude barely gave a crap when Sarah and Leela left. The real tragedy here is K9 leaves with her. I'm gonna miss my boy so much. So, yeah. Bravo to John Leeson and Lalla Ward for their contributions to the show. It's gonna be quite lonely now, with just the Doctor and Adric. But not for long, surely. Now I have to wonder how Sarah Jane Smith ended up with K9. And which version did she get? Leela's Mark 1 or Romana's Mark 2? Or a secret K9 Mark 3? Who knows? Not me, that's for sure. But what I do know is that we are going from one box set to another. The E-Space Trilogy is wrapped up and was an alright little mini arc. But the next one, I'm sure, is going to be unforgettable. Next week, we begin the New Beginnings box set with The Keeper of Traken. Traken? Oh, not again. Thank you very much for your support and viewership. After 14 years of owning this and never watching it, yeah, it wasn't worth the wait. But hopefully we can end the Fourth Doctor's era on a high note. If these DVDs don't work, I'm gonna flip. Moment of truth.